You're live.
We are live.
Okay, we want to welcome everyone to our council meeting. Just for you councilors that aren't here, we're doing this by Zoom. There's 3 people that, I'm including Bonnie Bruner on that from Old Man River Planning Commission. And we have Mrs. Olson and Christy Olson, Sue Olson and Christy Olson here, so, just so you know who's in attendance. So we'll call this meeting to order. First thing, we need a motion to adopt the agenda. You see there's a few extra items
I'll move to adopt the agenda.
with the added amendment.
Added amendments.
Okay, Councilor Harker moves. Any discussion on that? Then all in favor?
Yes.
Okay, good. Now need a motion to recess this council meeting so I can go into our public hearing.
I'll move.
Councilor Hagee makes that motion. All in favor?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, we're now gonna have the public hearing on bylaw 1095-21. Just before I call this meeting to order, I just want to remind you, this is we're just trying to learn the facts and so we can make a decision when we get down to it in our council meeting. So any of your questions or comments, should be trying to sway anybody one way or another, we're just trying to find facts. Am I right, Bonnie?
Yeah, it's the portion to gather public comment and concern with respect to the proposed bylaw, so that council has an understanding of firstly what's being proposed and any issues or concerns. Council will need to determine if at the end of the public hearing that you have adequate information to make a decision. If you determine that you need additional information, then the recommendation would be to table the hearing to another date. And then we would continue at that date specific with any additional information that's required.
Okay, so I was talking about the councilors, not Mark Evans. You're not, you're just to gather information. Okay, so I'll call this public hearing to order. We want to welcome everyone here, Christy and Sue. I want to welcome Mark. I suppose this is why you're on too. So Mark Baltazar, our development officer. First, I guess we'll turn the time to you.
Sure, so I'll kind of just inform everyone in the public hearing here about what the actual bylaw is actually being proposed here. Kind of give you the same briefing that I gave in the first reading of this bylaw, and just let you know some general information here. So what we have here is an application to go from the general residential land use district into the direct control district to allow a fine dining restaurant to be permitted in this particular lot. So we have some considerations here. Is that the applicant was informed prior to the purchase of the property that the zoning will have to be changed before any type of restaurant could be take place. Administratively, this is why we chose to go the direct control route, is that rather than doing a general commercial district, there is some uses in the general commercial district that would be permissible if we went that direction. So instead, we chose to do the direct control application to allow council to set some guidelines on what the actual requirements of this fine dining restaurant is. So that's why bylaw 1095 was drafted up and was already read to you guys for that location. This would be a 15-seat restaurant. Yeah, if we just keep scrolling down here, a little bit further, go on. Just want to actually get into the actual bylaw of what is proposed here. Yeah,
Right there or more?
a little more. So right here, so this is the actual written bylaw. So what this basically says here is that this is pertinent to lot 33, block 22A, otherwise known as 186 Broadway South. And it will be from general residential to direct control. And we keep scrolling down, we're going to see a map of the location. So here's 186 Broadway South. And then we also have some requirements later on. Keep going down. So the intent, let's just scroll up here a little bit. So the intent of this is to provide site-specific operations for the use of a restaurant, in addition to residential use. So it's going to be a dual use, a restaurant on the bottom floor, living quarters on the upstairs portion of the existing residence. The property is also designated as a registered historic resource with the province right now. And here we have our definitions for what is going to be allowed. So fine dining restaurant is the biggest definition here, meaning that is an establishment where food and beverages are prepared and served for consumption on the premises to customers seated in an indoor dining room with a maximum capacity not to exceed 15 customers. So that's a big component, is that we've kind of identified what the scale of this business is going to kind of be there. There's an additional component, is that there is a outdoor patio as well with a maximum capacity not to exceed 6 customers. So in total, that is 21 customers if the patio is open. There is prescribed hours of operations later on described, and it is 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Sunday. So originally the applicant actually proposed something a little bit more constrictive, but under first reading of the bylaw, council wanted to give flexibility to this this establishment to be between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. on Monday through Sunday. So this bylaw is the reflection of that change, and goes through there. So here's the actual uses that would be permitted in this discretionary use. So we have the fine dining restaurant listed as a permitted use. We also have 2 signs, sign type 9, which is a window sign, and also a shingle sign, which is defined above, which is a sign suspended and located underneath a covered porch, eave, or awning or entryway. There's a few discretionary uses. However, they're quite commonly found in the residential district. So there are things like accessory structures, a temporary shipping container, solar collector, other signs. They're discretionary, so they're not automatically approved. They would have to come back to approval, just like any other spot in the residential kind of district. So those are the permitted and the discretionary uses. The minimum lot size doesn't really factor because we do have an existing title we want to put this on. It's direct control district. The setbacks are outlined as you see there. Really the existing residence is there, so it's not a huge factor. We're not going to be changing a lot of the principal structure. It's going to be using the existing building that's currently there. The big thing here is going to be item number 10 here, parking requirements. So in our land use bylaw in the commercial district, we have outlined that we have requirements there for 1 parking stall per 4 seats in the restaurant. So the applicant has provided a parking plan which is attached as Appendix C in this application, which shows parking on the actual boulevard to accommodate the off-street parking. This was done in conjunction with one of 2 things. Administratively, the applicant actually sat down with myself, the development officer, to kind of go over this parking plan. And we kind of looked at trying to get completely off-site parking. So that would be getting vehicles strictly on their lot. So we came up with a plan that would actually use the boulevard as parking. And that was what was proposed. Some of the letters you're gonna read today actually have, bringing up, a different bylaw that actually council passed in 2019, which is the care of Boulevard and Lanes bylaw. And so we're gonna go into that maybe a little bit later on once we hear from some public input and read those letters. But one thing I do wanna mention is that I think the respondents today have actually went and looked at that bylaw, and we may in fact have kind of maybe suggested something that wasn't actually ironed out beforehand. So using the boulevard as parking might be contrary to a bylaw that we already have passed. So we might need to do a little bit of adjustment before we officially pass this bylaw. So we're gonna go into that maybe in a little bit here, but I just wanted to maybe bring that to your attention right away. Here's the hours of operation that we have. This has been adjusted. This is in kind of an older version of my original briefing to council. It has since been changed to be 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Sunday. This other stuff is fairly straightforward. It's pretty standard. And here is the parking plan. Again, we're going to kind of talk about this later on, but again, parking using the boulevard rather than actually off-street parking. 6 stalls were being proposed, and that's the application as it stands right now.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Mark? That includes you, Mark. Evans, if you have a question too. Anybody have any questions for Mark? I think,
Mark, are
is
you
that the
gonna,
way, just a second, Joan, is that the way I do it? Does the public can ask questions now too?
I think that's later, isn't it?
Or is that later?
That's a little later.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mark. I guess you'll have your chance a little bit later. Any of council have any questions they want to ask Mark? Go ahead, Joan.
I just was gonna ask, you're gonna talk about the revamping of the parking right now, so we know what that is, or?
Sure. Yeah. I can kind of
I'm
take
just
you through that.
curious.
So we're going to go through and we're going to read 2 responses, response A and response B. They bring up some people that actually wrote those responses did their homework quite diligently, and they brought up this rule that we have of parking on the boulevard must not exceed 20% of the frontage of the lot. And so after looking and reading their comments, I went back and made sure I was checked and informed before we come to you guys to let you know what's going on here. So, so the care of boulevards and bylaw, care of boulevards and lanes bylaw, that was passed in 2019, dealt with people parking on the boulevard, and this was passed that blanketed the entire community. So. And there is no waverances for what was proposed here. So in our land use bylaw, we have these are two separate entities. Our land use bylaw and this care of boulevard lanes. There's 2 separate entities. In our land use bylaw, we have strictly rules to allow discretion in some of the rules that we put on here. In our care of boulevards and lanes bylaw, it does say strictly that it is 20% of the maximum frontage. And so we will be going through this public hearing these comments, but my recommendation is to potentially table the decision until you clear up this care of boulevards and bylaw, or care of boulevards and lanes bylaw, to allow this parking to happen officially, so that these first 2 written responses don't feel like you haven't just circumvented some of your own bylaws that you passed in itself. So
you're recommending we wait and gather more info on that?
I recommend that you make the decision to table it. I think that you could continue on with this public hearing and close this public hearing, but later on, and then in the decision of the
Okay,
of the bylaws. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, maybe table that one Oh, yeah, more info.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, anyone else have any questions? Good question, Councillor Harker. Anyone else have any questions for Mark? Okay, we'll move to Bonnie. Bonnie, do you have any input you want to give
Yeah, I
us on
just
this?
have a couple of conditions, dealing with considerations for rezoning. And so, there is a section in the land use bylaw that I'll just familiarize you with when you're considering rezonings. And some of the things that you have to take into consideration. So obviously, there's requirements for compliance with applicable standards and provisions of the land use bylaw, which also too will address, when we speak specifically to some of the written responses. Consistency with the municipal development plan and any other adopted plans. Compatibility with adjacent uses, and certainly there are some comments that we are in receipt that deal with compatibility, and so it'll be part of council's determination to consider those responses and determine if in fact the proposed use is compatible and suitable with adjacent uses. Then development potential and suitability of the site, availability of facilities and services, cumulative impact to the town, potential impacts on public roads, setback distances contained in the subdivision development regulation, and in fact that isn't applicable in this case. Supply of suitably designated land, then the public comment, excuse me, public comment and any applicable review agency comments received, and then any other matters deemed pertinent by council. With respect to the municipal development plan policies, I do just want to point out a few of them that are applicable here. So as Mark indicated, I think in his original briefing, in the municipal development plan, there is a future land use and growth directions map, and this area is identified as suitable for residential development. However, there are possibilities for commercial development within the residential area. Policies indicate that commercial activity in residential neighborhoods will generally be limited to home occupation subject to requirements of the land use bylaw. However, we do have provisions relating to small scale commercial development, which I think this could constitute. And it indicates that this type of commercial development may be considered where there is an identifiable need and evidence that the use will have a limited impact on viability of the commercial core and is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. So again, getting back to the whole idea of compatibility is really what the issue is associated with this application. Going to a straight district certainly would not be compatible with respect to the types of uses that could be accommodated. But given that this is a direct control district, the intent is to keep the impact limited to what is being proposed here. So it wouldn't be possible for somebody to, in the future, open up some sort of retail business.
Bonnie, I'm gonna have to have you move up here.
Okay. Without going through the process to amend this current bylaw. So there wouldn't be any other uses that could be permitted except for what is currently listed in this direct control district. Also too, I do want to make sure that everybody understands what direct control is. There is very limited capability for appeal. And so that's why it's important that council fully understand what's being approved so that there's no question about what can and can't occur on a property. With direct control, and this direct control bylaw in particular, there is a delegation of decision making to the development officer and to the municipal planning commission. And so all of the details prescribed in the bylaw are what those two decision making authorities are bound by. With respect to appeal, it would be very limited in terms of what could be appealed in this district, and it would be simply, did the development authority follow the rules established in the direct control district? So again, that's why it's important to really understand what's being proposed. With respect to the parking consideration, my recommendation would be actually that you wouldn't close the hearing so that we could then bring back that information from council's discussion, because that does make a difference in terms of whether or not the parking can be accommodated on the boulevard, or if we have to look at a different configuration. So, and then we'll speak to some of the public comments later on that do address some bylaw requirements.
Does anyone have any questions for Bonnie Bruner? I was gonna ask about, for you to explain direct control, but you did that, so. Okay, then I guess we'll move on to private citizens, so. We have two in the room. Either of you wish to speak?
Would you prefer me to give an overall of the business, or would you prefer me to answer questions afterwards? Or both?
Maybe, I'm not sure, is that how it works?
Do both, yeah, do both. I'm super awkward on camera, so please forgive me.
It's just the mic that'll
To be
hear
up
you.
there, okay, wonderful. So our intent with this is, it is our home, it's still our home no matter what is happening on that main floor. I want to be able to provide a high-class dining experience for people on a very small scale, which means using local providers, local farmers. I'm not using any large corporations like GFS or Cisco. It'll be farmers markets and as much Southern Alberta as I possibly can. My hope is to maintain that home feel throughout the entire establishment, as that was my favorite part of eating as a kid, was going to grandpa's farm and, you know, having a good meal. So I want it to feel like you're going to your mom's house for dinner, but a little elevated. I'm more than open to work with people and what they need. It's been my dream for a long time, and I'm 20 years in this industry, and I don't want to do big city anymore. I want to come back home and cook. And now I'm super awkward, so I'm going to sit down.
Any questions for Ms. Olson, or anybody? Okay, Councillor Voss has a question?
I was just gonna ask you about, you said you're not using Cisco or some of the other big suppliers, so would you expect there to be like delivery trucks and stuff like that coming to this business?
The only delivery I have so far set up is with a farm out of Nobleford, Gallamax Trading, and it's an all organic farms of Alberta and BC. I believe they use a cube van. Outside of that, I'll personally be going to pick up all of my ingredients.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, we have some written responses. We also have Mr. Evans. I'm sure he wants to speak to it. So is this when I let him do it? Okay, Mr. Mark, do you want to speak?
We got to mute his microphone.
You're muted, I think.
There he goes. He's good.
Okay,
Is this the time?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, well, you've covered a lot of my questions already. One question was regarding the parking. And I was concerned about large groups, but seating capacity of 15 indoors, 6 outdoors, I don't think that's much of a concern. And my worry was the parking would spill over to the areas in front of the houses across the street. And we have no say who parks there anyway, so we're good there. I was worried about the traffic and the delivery system of the products for the eating establishment seems to be limited, so I'm not concerned about that. I suppose the main concern I have is noise, especially in the warm months of the year, eating outdoors, how noisy that might be. Not necessarily to me across the street away from it, but the neighbors to the back and to the sides. They might have a concern with that. And you answered my question about future commercial development after, say, the restaurant was to close. Would it revert, does rezoning revert back to the R1, or would it stay commercial so that another establishment could go in there? That's one question I had.
Did you say that last question was answered, or do you need an answer?
I need an answer.
Go ahead, Bonnie.
If the rezoning is it permanent? If it's changed to commercial, is that permanent? Or if the this eating establishment closes, does it revert back to R1 or does it stay commercial?
It does not revert back to R1. It remains zone direct control.
Can you speak up?
Yeah, it remains direct control, so the listed uses in the bylaw are what prevails. So a new restaurant specific to the criterion established here could be considered for approval, but you'd have to get a development permit approval if any component of that restaurant changed. So if it was approved, there'd be a development permit issued for a 15-seat fine dining restaurant with the 6 outdoor. If there were, and of course a list of conditions associated with that. If a new restaurant was to be established, it would have to follow those exact parameters. Otherwise a new permit is required. And that would have to be continuously, right? So if the restaurant was sold, there's only a short time frame within which you can remain dormant before it could continue as a restaurant without getting a new permit. The other option is if the property was to be sold and the new owner has no desire to go to a commercial use that's listed, that person could make an application to rezone it back to R1. But the direct control district would prevail until such time there'd be a rezoning to residential.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question? Councillor Foss.
This is a follow-up for Bonnie. Because fine dining is a permitted use, is that under the discretion of the development officer?
Yes, and so it's not really discretionary, so it's permitted specific to the very specific criterion we've established in the direct control district. There's no ability for variance with this bylaw. So if they couldn't meet the parking requirements or there was some component that could not be met, then the bylaw would have to go through a bylaw amendment. So even though it's delegated to the development officer, it's very specific in terms of what can be approved.
Anyone else? Councillor Foss, you have another question?
Sorry, just to follow on that, so assuming that a new application met all of the criteria of this bylaw, it would be approved without question?
Yes, as long as it was for fine dining. So it would have to meet the definition of fine dining.
Same conditions.
The exact same, the exact same
So it
parameters.
So it could be
Could not be
fast
fast food. It couldn't be a Subway. It couldn't be anything except for fine dining, which is very prescriptive, which was intentional because it is recognized this is a residential neighborhood.
So there cannot be a cannabis store there in the future without application and approval.
Without an amendment to the direct control district, yes.
That was my question. Thanks, Councilor Paul.
So it's very prescriptive. A fine dining restaurant as defined in the bylaw, nothing else. And your house, obviously.
Yeah.
So Councillor Fromm?
I have a question, Mr. Evans, if you will allow me, Mark. I've been in favor of this from the inception. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago, and I'm still in favor of it, but I didn't realize anyone in the neighborhood would be opposed to it. That was a surprise to me to see 3 dissenting letters. Now, I don't live there, so I want to make sure that I vote right. I do feel personally in favor of it, but I don't want neighbors to be put upon with something they don't want in their neighborhood. You said that your concerns were answered. How do you feel about your position on the application? Is that fair to ask, Mark?
That's fair to ask. I wouldn't say that I'm opposed to it. Of course, I would feel better if it wasn't going to be there. I did have a question as I was thinking about it about the boulevard parking. I think that frontage is 132 feet. 20% of that is about 27 feet. And that is not a lot of space. It seems like you had about 6 or 7 parking places shown on the diagram.
6, you're correct.
Okay. If it's 27 feet wide, which is 20%, then that's 3 or 4. this is, I guess, just the way it's going to look across the street. But no, I wouldn't say that I'm directly opposed to it. I just had some concerns. And in talking with you tonight, I think most of those have been alleviated. Thank you.
And one more question. Can you speak for the Carlsons and the Taylors and the Nemes? Are you a spokesperson at all or not?
I am not,
Okay,
but I would imagine their concerns are the same as mine.
thank you.
Carlson have moved.
Okay,
Carlson's and Taylor's are really the same residents.
Yeah.
So you have two letters from the same residents.
Same house, yeah.
okay.
Anyone else have any questions? So I have a couple. Say Christie, just say everything goes great. And you're making a ton of money and someone comes along and wants to do a wedding or something there. I mean, but they want to have 25 people. I mean, this could happen. I've seen weddings happen in there. I've been to a wedding and a wedding reception dinner in that house. So what are you gonna do? And if that happens and you do that, then what's our course to stop that, Bonnie?
So we did have some discussion early on about whether to allow, that would be called a special event. And it was specifically left out of the bylaw as an event hosting facility. So if there's a circumstance where the capacity is exceeded and there's weddings in the backyard and so on and so forth, then we do have to undertake enforcement. And that would be through a warning letter and then going to a stop order. So we'd have the same enforcement capability in any other district and would just go through that process for enforcement. The other option is, let's say there's a circumstance where the applicant does want to start hosting events, then again, the bylaw would have to be amended to allow that to occur.
So she would have to come back here.
She'd have to come back, you'd have to hold a new public
Go through the
hearing.
same process.
Yes,
But as of right now, she wouldn't be able to hold special events like that.
no, I mean,
To
if
exceed
there's a
capacity.
wedding party inside
Yeah, to
with
exceed
15
capacity.
people
To 21
eating
people.
their supper,
What can
you
you
know,
do?
nobody's really gonna know,
That's right.
you're there dining.
Right.
But if it is used as an event space for hosting of weddings in the backyard, that is a completely different category that we'd call special events.
Okay, good. My second question is, were all the residents notified, like some to the north, on both sides of the street and the south?
Yes, I can comment on that. So, on that whole block that fronts Broadway, that this residence is on the east side and the west side, all the way down the block, and including the corner parcels just to the south, as well as the lots that back onto it. So I do have a map kind of showing right here in blue of who was notified. It was quite extensive because I thought that this needed some particular, a little bit more justification just to let people know what's going on. And then also subsequently, we've had 2 ads in our newspapers, the West Wind Weekly, that have been circulated for the last 2 Thursdays. And it's been about a 10 by 11 newspaper ad notifying people of the public hearing. So I would say that the notification component was quite extensive, given the nature of this, and we wanted to make sure that we did our due diligence to get the word out. So.
Okay, so can you on Zoom, could you see what he was holding up? Councilor Peters, could you see that?
No.
I couldn't see it, but I had a dialogue with Mark a little earlier about how many people were contacted, and he let me know.
Councilor Foss, do you want to see this, or Mark, do you want to see this?
Is that a map of who would have been contacted?
Yes,
And it would be similar to our, like any adjacent, even across the road?
except
properties?
he's gone to every residence all the way down to the, what is it, 300 south? 200 south?
No, the all corner parcels on 200 South and Broadway have gotten it,
Can you show that?
as well as all lots along the
Oh,
the
there it
north
is.
and the south, yeah.
So that's every residence, and then you said some behind too?
Yeah, so the ones just to it's hard to a little bit see there, but that block, that faces, there's streets, there's lots that front onto 50,
West.
50 West there,
That's,
so they back onto this parcel.
okay,
So,
okay, well, good, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? So, we need to be able to make sure everyone understands what we're gonna be talking about when we get back into council meetings, so last call for any comments or questions. Bonnie?
I think, Mark and I just want to maybe address some of the public
Oh,
comment.
I'm sure, I'm sorry, for sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So,
We're gonna-
Mark's already touched on the Boulevard parking. The other component would be the barrier-free parking comment that was brought up. And it was noted that in the parking plan, that there wasn't any barrier-free parking identified. In our land use bylaw for the size of this development, you're not required to have barrier-free parking, it's just recommended. However, the parking plan here does exceed the minimum stall requirements for barrier-free, so easily one of those could be converted to barrier-free parking. The garbage enclosure issue that was brought up, the development could comply with the setback requirements, and that would have to be determined through the development permit application. And in fact, the garbage could even be stored in the garage without a defined enclosure. We currently have a 25-foot setback from an adjacent residential use. And so given the size of this lot, it's 115 feet wide. It could easily be accommodated to meet that setback. The on-site maneuvering of garbage and delivery trucks isn't applicable due to the circumstances, of course, unless it was some private garbage contractor. And in that case, we'd have to obviously look at what the original approval was, but again, that could be met. The question of the fire lane and blocking access on the driveway, based on the proposal, the driveway itself isn't proposed to serve as a fire lane. The fire lane is the roadway itself. And then lastly, comments about Alberta Health Services and whether or not the applicant could comply with those. That's really something outside of this board's jurisdiction. Alberta Health regulates that, and if there is substantial improvement or change to the home that needs to occur, that's something that the applicant will have to undertake. And so really, whether or not that can be accommodated is up to the applicant. Obviously, we'd place that as a condition that you'd have to get whatever approvals. But as far as whether the property is suitable to be rezoned to direct control, that component really isn't I guess a defensible planning rationale for refusing the direct control district. And I think that was it, unless there's anything additional Mark wanted to add.
No, I think that addresses some of the comments that were brought up in those written responses. Again, I think there is some validity in that 20% rule that we have passed in a bylaw that we should be just revisiting before we make a decision here to make sure that we give fair and just cause for those people that are affected.
So I'm sorry for getting ahead of myself. Thank you for going over those things, Bonnie. Just to talk about garbage, is that something we talk about later, or is there questions we have for you now?
Questions would be now. Yeah,
Would be
so you have to gather all the information that you want as part of the public hearing, which again, we'd be making the recommendation that you recess the hearing until we can figure out the parking issues.
So those are good questions about the garbage. We talked about maybe they could be stored in the garage, or maybe there'd be another facility where they could restore or put their garbage, like some of these places have, some of our commercial places have.
Right, and I think what the point was is that the proposed development can comply with the bylaw requirements. We don't have those specifics at this time though, because the official development application hasn't been made. So while it is a consideration, it wouldn't have to be directly addressed in the bylaw because we've done so saying that that particular schedule of the land use bylaw applies. And so whatever provisions the applicant needs to make to comply with the bylaw would be dealt with at the time of the development permit.
Okay.
But based on our preliminary analysis, it appears they could comply with that requirement.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for Bonnie? Okay. Then I guess I'll now move to 4.3, the last call for comments or questions. Last call from anybody, comments or questions? If not, then guess I need a motion to adjourn this public hearing. Nope.
No, we want to recess.
I'll move to recess.
Okay.
Once you're adjourned, then you can't have any more discussion on it. So you want to have a recess.
Go ahead, Bonnie.
So you can iron out the parking
Sorry.
situation.
Yeah, and if you could recess to a date specific, then we don't have to re-advertise the public hearing.
Just next.
So what do you suggest for a date specific? Like you're talking 2 weeks?
Next week, something?
Yeah, so it
16th.
Should be on a council meeting night,
has to be on a council meeting.
so in 2 weeks.
Well, and then you'll also have to ensure that you have adequate time to review the Boulevard bylaw.
So that could be next week. Is that,
Well, if you need to make amendments, you have to do that at council meeting as well.
so you're talking, okay,
We're
well,
talking weeks, could
Potentially.
be weeks. Back to Christie, what are your, what stage of development are you in?
I'm waiting for the go-ahead so that we can get going. As soon as I get the okay from town, then we figure out parking, I put in my dish pit and pick up the produce and start hiring. So I'm twiddling my thumbs until we
So
get
do
the
you
okay.
have your approvals from,
I've already spoken to
Safety,
Alberta Health
safety.
Code. I have one more door to put up, and then we're in compliance with everything. I do need to speak with the inspectors specifically. We're not putting in any commercial equipment. So I know there's fire walls that need to be put up with commercial equipment, but it's the same residential stove that comes with the house. I'm not adding anything different. So that's the only other thing I need to look at.
so go ahead.
Yeah, so we just had a discussion here that if you put the bylaw for the boulevards on your committee meeting, if you've determined that you need to make amendment, you could then address that firstly at your next council meeting and then resume the public hearing for this after that.
For sure, it sounds like 2 weeks would
So it
work.
could be done in 2 weeks.
Okay.
we could
So
do it
now
in 2
move
weeks.
to move this to March 16th.
To recess this to March
Recess till
16th.
March 16th.
Okay, everybody understand that motion? Okay, then I'll call for the vote, all in favor?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for helping us, we don't do these enough to remember how to do them, so I appreciate you walking us through it a little bit. Okay, so this public hearing's now been adjourned. So now we need a motion to resume our council meeting. Councillor Hagee makes that motion, all in favor?
yes.
So we're just gonna let Mark go off of,
Okay, unless he wants to stay on.
well, he can watch it on YouTube.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
So we're basically 2 weeks. And then they can make a decision.
so
Mayor,
Councillor Foss.
can I ask a quick question about the recess of the public hearing?
Sure, Bonnie, you might want to stay for this. Go ahead.
Is it still open for public comment while we're in recess, or is the period for public comment concluded?
The period for public comment has concluded, however, someone can attend the next public hearing and make comment if they so wish.
Which is the one in 2 weeks where we're gonna
Yes.
actually,
Yeah.
okay,
Okay, thank you.
thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, let's move to, so delegations, as you can see, that's been dropped. So now move to approval of minutes, 7.1, council minutes of February 16th. We had a chance to look, Councillor Fawn moves, accept those. Any discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Good. 7.2, the council committee minutes from February 23rd.
I'll move those.
Councillor Harker moves to accept them. Any discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Okay, good. Items for discussion, 9.1, this bylaw 1095-21, 186, the Broadway South rezoning application, we just had the public hearing for. I guess we're gonna table this until we can gather more info. So what we need from someone is a motion to table it.
I'll move to table the rezoning of 186 Broadway South,
Okay, Councillor Harker moves.
To March 16th.
March 16th, thank you.
Okay. So any discussion on that? Then all in favor?
Yes.
Okay. 9.2, the 2021 Town of Raymond RCMP police priorities. Curtis, you want to speak on this?
A couple of weeks ago, Sergeant Wright came and discussed the need for revamp council piece or RCMP priorities for the year. The K Division is not setting priorities for the RCMP detachment this year. And so they're just requesting, and we have had a number of them on previously. I just thought it would be time to maybe review them based upon comments that were made. If you're okay with this, just new motions outlining these three or others as the RCMP priorities for the community for 2021. But it's totally at your discretion, just a new document we could send them with the current vision.
So just to add, I attended the COP meeting and a lot of their priorities with the RCMP were the same, which is very interesting, and I'm glad they're involved in that. So does anybody have anything they want to add to this? Then we need a motion to accept this as a priorities document.
I just realized I have a wrong date at the bottom there, March 21st, we'll work on that. Otherwise,
Okay, it should say March 2nd, just got a 1 on there. Okay, need a motion from someone on this?
I'll move
Councillor-
to approve these priorities.
Councillor Foss? Any discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Good. 9.3, the COVID-19 information. Do you want to talk on this, Curtis?
as I'm sure everyone is aware, the province had some relaxation of the restrictions, not as far as what was originally, I guess, hoped for or anticipated. However, libraries are now allowed to take in-person visitation up to 15% of fire code. And there have been some changes to indoor and outdoor, well, indoor county recreation. They really don't affect anything that we're currently offering. And so we're kind of in a status quo for that respect. The documents that I have there before you for your information. If you have any questions, I can try and answer them. If not, we'll try and get the answers.
Okay, this is just for information purposes. Does anybody have any comments or thoughts on this? I'll add mine. I thought it was a little disappointing they didn't move to phase 3 of their restrictions, but everything has been, seems to be going as they asked this citizens of Alberta to do, but yet they don't seem to want to move it. They seem to have other fears. So,
I'm disappointed they didn't even move to phase 2.
I mean, the phase 2 is what I meant. I'm sorry.
Our numbers are below what they wanted to be for phase 3, and they didn't move to phase 2.
Me too.
Math just doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, well, this is just for information purposes anyway. Any other discussion? We'll move on to 9.4, the arena closure. When our delegation came in and proposed having the arena go for another month or 6 weeks, we talked about this, that this is what we would do. This is the date, I think, to March 13th. It's sad that our kids are in the arena, didn't get to have a game because of the restrictions, but I guess that's the way it goes. At least they got to practice and got on the ice and enjoyed that time. Any thoughts from this from anybody? we need a motion, I guess. Councillor Peters, you wanna make a motion?
I
Comment?
have a comment. I did get a text today from a member of the Raymond Minor Hockey Association that he wanted to let council know that they appreciated the opportunity to get into the rink. They for sure wish that the season would have been longer. They could have done more things, but they understand the need to close it at our scheduled time. So they're in support of closing it on the 13th of March.
So I understand that some of the rinks that did close down, that took their ice out, did put their ice back in now. Now their date is April 1st, so they're gonna extend it for another, we're for 2 more weeks, so they're gonna extend it for 2 more weeks after that. Anyway,
I understand the March 13th and I'm in support of that, but I would hate that they come out on March 10th and say the kids can start playing games and then we're taking ice out 3 days later. I'd like to see us have March 13th as our date, but if they come out before March 13th, then they can start playing games, we leave in 1 more week. That way the community can get together, and I know a lot of people that would get together and they talked to me about it, to put on 1 tournament for the kids, which would happen on the weekend of the 20th. Now, I don't know if that's gonna put a lot of stress on the town crews, because they're gonna start getting the golf course ready and stuff like that, but if they don't change it, if you look at the Q&A after the announcement yesterday, they did say that as of right now, you can't play games, but we might change our minds tomorrow and play games tomorrow. So I would just say for them to come out and, I just like to just put that in there just in case they come out and say the kids play games, we get 1 tournament for the kids.
That's not actually how I read them. I mean, they're pretty committed to 3 weeks between steps. So even if they went to stage 2, they'd go 3 weeks at least before they'd even go to stage 3. So that's, I don't know. I can see some virtue in what you're saying. So you're in agreement with the March 13th?
March 13th, but if they announce that we can play games right before then, I'd like to leave 1 more week just so the kids can have a tournament and play some games and you know, get something out of the season. Because right now they're just practicing.
Pretty
right?
big if, so it's not much of a gamble for anyone.
So it's not much of a gamble, and if they don't, then it's out on March 13th.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I am in approval of anything that will improve the mental health of our poor children who have been so affected by this. Like I have 10 and 12-year-old grandkids that are kind of depressed, which is kind of sad. Should 10-year-olds be depressed?
No.
You know?
And Council Fry, I understand, I don't think they're gonna read that
I don't
announcement.
either.
Yeah.
But if they
But
did,
I sympathize with you.
yeah, if they did, I'd just like to throw something together just so the kids can have something.
Absolutely. I'm in total.
You know, and it's
approval of
just
that.
1 more week. And, but I don't wanna put too much stress on the crews if they're starting out with the golf course and stuff like that too, I totally understand that too. But I just thought that we could do this for the kids if they do.
Anything we can do for the kids, I'm all over it.
And I don't think they will, but just in case, I would just like to throw that in there.
so I was talking to Hugh today and he said the outdoor skating pond has been used quite a bit.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
With
Yeah, I
great
thought-
reviews.
I talked to him on the weekend about it, he said it was used, unfortunately, they can only use the 1 pond.
Yeah,
But,
that's okay.
it'd be nice if they could use the other ones, but they can't. Just not safe, so. But, he's got some good ideas for next year.
Yeah.
It's gonna be exciting that we do it for a whole season.
Any
Mayor?
other, Councillor Peters?
Yeah, I totally sympathize with what Ken's saying. I understand. I spoke with you yesterday. I actually had a baseball meeting with him yesterday when we were discussing some things, and he just talked about the weather continues to get warm. He's going to need all crews out getting courses and ball time and stuff ready to go. So I'm not trying to sway from the importance of the rink. I think it does have value and things. However, I think they have set timelines they're trying to stick to. And I guess we look back to it, another week of ice is still going to cost us a bunch of money. So I think we kind of made the decision. With our schools, I had the same situation of wanting to run a basketball program. We set a deadline of March 1st. If the province came out and did not allow for a competition, we were going to not pursue basketball and just do some different things. So we've had to make this decision. I think we have to kind of stick to our guns here and go with what we set in place.
So we don't need another motion, or do we, Curtis? The motion right now is to
Close it.
close
We
it on.
never have a motion.
We never had a motion to close it on the 13th?
Well, I think the motion of the last time was that we would keep it open. The March 13th is our tentative deadline. I mean, as was discussed, I mean, we could have 6 inches or 2 feet of snow fall on, March 13th. Nobody's going to be working on the golf course in the park site, right? So weather depending is something that needs to be considered. But ideally, we run a 22-week season, middle of October to middle of March. That's historically what we do. That's typically when temperatures tend to warm up. It's hotter on the ice plant. The costs are there. And the staff is technically transitioning to getting equipment ready for summer and spring operations. So given the, interest in this, I would ask for a motion just to close the arena on March 13th, because I don't think we actually said we would close it on March 13th when we extended it. It was just we're going to extend it until the tentative date. But that's up to you. You can just say, no, we've already said to March 13th, and that's when we'll pick it up.
Councillor Foss?
I just took a peek back at that old resolution, and we said that we would leave it open and discuss at the March 2nd meeting, which is what we're doing. So I do think we probably need a
Good job.
resolution close.
Good job, You're looking that up, okay? So we need a motion from someone?
I'll make that motion, that we close March 13th as proposed here.
Okay. Any discussion on that? Okay, I'll call it to the vote then, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Okay,
I think it'll go that way.
I think we'll try,
I do too, but.
I just would hate to,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, they say, yeah, go play games and it'd be really good for the kids.
It would be really good.
And,
No one can fault you for thinking that way.
not my problem.
but I understand the other way too, like
Yeah, me too.
I understand both sides.
We've made the motion, it's a done deal, so.
Yeah.
Okay, 9.5, the National Police Federation. Wasn't this interesting?
Yes.
A lot of reading from the National Police Federation. It's a lobby group on behalf of, in favor of the RCMP in Alberta. So just some context of kind of their position and what their perspective is. They have some documentation, some recent polling. They're using the province's Fair Deal panel conversations to kind of justify whether or not an Alberta provincial police force has more value than an RCMP police force. Administratively, I mean, they make a lot of very salient points. We haven't really had a chance to vet them to just determine the bias that this group may have compared to what the province is considering, because the province hasn't given any numbers. However, just anecdotally, the costs, there would be additional cost to, even just to rebrand the RCMP to a different police force, there's significant costs, and then the staffing. If there's going to be loss of staff or some still want to remain with the RCMP. So there's a lot of variables in gray here. I just thought it was prudent for you to see the information. The province is considering this as part of their Fair Deal panel conversations. And so obviously we would be very concerned about having any additional costs downloaded onto the municipalities. So if that were in fact the case, I don't think administratively we would be recommending the approval of an Alberta police force from a municipal perspective. However, that may be out of our hands. And so if you'd like to make any recommendations or letters of support, this is kind of the time to start thinking about it and gathering some information. But it's hard to get an actual comparison now. We don't even know what the cost would be for the province.
So in that meeting that I was at, I zoomed in on the budget, the AUMA's budget meeting. They first talked about this. The government took $15 million from the municipalities and for RCMP, and we know that wasn't all allocated, because they didn't get the RCMP, they didn't get the members, and not put, a lot of that money wasn't spent, and they're asking for more money next year. I didn't catch that number when he said it to get it wrote down, but you might know it, Curtis, how much money they're expecting next year from everybody's bump up on the policing requisition. So I sympathize with this, and I agree with this, that this, there's a letter we're gonna talk about in correspondence that's farther down from the Crow's Nest Pass mayor. It's not in favor of this, and we can talk about that then, I guess. Like it says, only 6% support replacing the RCMP from this study or survey that was done. Anyone else have a comment or thought on this?
When I read all this stuff, I just figured somebody's got a cart before the horse. I think, let's wait and see what the province comes up with. And I don't think they will. I mean, if this poll is indicative of the way it really is in the province, I don't think the government will waste much time in trying to replace the provincial, like come up with the provincial police force. But why cross the bridge till you get to it? I know they're trying to be proactive and everything else, but it seems premature to me. I'm willing to wait and see what the province does, because it's probably a moot point.
Well, I hope it's a moot point. It's got me worried.
I think it's a hard thing to even think about, because there's so much we don't know.
And they've got bigger fish to fry, and I think they will fry the big fish first, there's no question. But I mean, why not look at what the province has? If they do think there's some value in doing that, short term or long term, we might as well see it. I don't want to stifle the province from, doing something that they're just looking into. I just feel like it's premature to oppose it.
It's an interesting take. Anyway, anyone else have any comments or thoughts on this? Okay, well, this is just for you to be able to see this, I guess. You don't have to make a motion on this. So move on to 9.6, the national 3-digit 988 hotline.
Excuse me, back that one more time. There was an assertion in all that information that the province is dedicated to this and one other issue. I don't see that in the province myself.
Well, I've heard it at quite a few different meetings about that this is the way they might be going, but I'm looking into it.
No, and they were also throwing up the Alberta pension plan instead of the Canadian pension plan and stuff like that. And I think they realize when as soon as they realize that it's more expensive than it is valuable, I think they'll drop it. Sorry, I think it will, yeah.
We'll talk about that later when we get down there, what road this passes road. So, okay, it's a 9.6, the national 3-digit 988 hotline. This is what the Conservatives come up with at Parliament. And they're asking us if we agree with this, which I think I believe it's something we should be doing. Supporting. So if we need a motion then to draft our Raymond Town Council into this letter and send this off. Councillor Peters?
Yeah, Mayor, I was gonna say, I support that, and I'll make that motion that we draft letters submitted in support of this 988 crisis line.
Okay, good. Any discussion on this? Okay, then I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Yes.
Okay, good. 9.7, the Act Society, Canadian Healthy Communities Initiative Grant Application. I was waiting to see something, but I guess you're gonna put it up, Curtis, for us to see this?
We don't have the letter drafted yet, but it's gonna be very similar to any other letter that we sent in for community groups that are applying for grant applications, basically saying that the town of Raymond is supportive of the application, we own the land, that the improvements are gonna be going on. We'll live up to the objectives and the obligations that the Ag Society has as a recipient if they're successful. So just a letter of support, just a motion directing administration to draft that letter of support, and to send the letter of support, and we'll get that written up and Mayor if you sign it.
Have they received any money from this grant before, in the past?
Nobody has yet on this one. It's a new grant program as part of COVID, I believe, or it's been repurposed for COVID.
Any idea how much money it's up to?
5,000 to 250,000.
No kidding. Well, we want to support them on this.
Absolutely.
We like the maximum amount.
We like the 200,000.
Someone want to make a motion on this?
I'll make the motion that we draw up a letter of support for the Ag Society for this grant application.
Okay. Any discussion?
Mayor?
Councillor Foss?
Just one comment that I think we would or my feeling is that I would always support us writing letters of support to any community groups that's seeking grant funding, and so perhaps this is worth, I will support this motion, but perhaps it's worth looking at if we could draft something, some sort of policy or motion that would get blanket approval to administration to, review these at their discretion and approve them at their discretion without having to bring them back to us.
Okay, good. It's also nice to know when they do come back to us what it's about, so we can support it and kind of be anxious to wait to hear from it when they get it. But I hear what you're saying, it just would speed up our meetings. So we have a motion on the floor, did we vote on that already? Not yet. Any other discussion on this? And I'll call for the vote, all in favor?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, we'll move to 9.8, the Raymond High School request. We've already-
If possible, we've just had some internal discussions and we're wanting to know if council will be willing to just defer this to committee next week, just so we can gather a bit more information.
That's what I was gonna suggest myself.
So I was gonna ask the table up till next week,
Yeah, I'd like to
just
hear.
get more info on it.
I'd like to find out, like, for example, how busy our golf course is, how much we would lose, how much they would make, how much it's worth it to them. I'm sure you can answer all those questions next week.
And we can get at least our perspective of costs. We won't know what they make because it's gonna depend on their fundraising efforts and how many people show up in the pricing, but
For sure.
we'll definitely, it's not that we wanna delay this, there's not an urgent rush. I think we still have time to let it go next week and then have an approval of the following week if you're still in favor, so if you're okay with just table it.
For sure.
And I'd also like to know, like, is there anything in the lease agreement for the person that has the kitchen down there? For other people to have like food and beverages down there?
There's nothing in that, but we would have as one of the conditions that we were talking about is that a certain portion would have to go through Brimstone, so that they're being compensated for a loss of the day in that sense. So, but those are things that we'll bring back.
So we don't need a motion to table this, you'll just bring it back to committee, right?
Correct.
Okay. 9.9, the council commitment statement.
So we talked about this last week at committee. Annually, you as a council, at the beginning of your term, you kind of set your council priorities, strategic plan, vision, mission statement. We have, it's been public, it just really hasn't been that well advertised. We've done up this printed image here that will be in the front lobby of the council chambers, of the town office. And we just felt that it would be prudent to have each of you sign it. We got a white Sharpie, so after the meeting, when we take our council term photo, we'll have you all sign the Sharpie. We'll keep it up there at the beginning of the next term. We'll do this again if the new council wants to change their commitment, but it's just a way to formalize the brand, but also formalize what your purpose has been and the objectives and the ideals that you strive to meet and achieve during your term.
Sounds good. Okay. So we'll have that for after the meeting, then we'll sign that. Okay, we'll move to 9.10 then, the subdivision decision, 2018-0-027, extension request. Go ahead, Curtis.
We talked about this last week at committee meeting. There was an applicant who had a subdivision application. It received approval in 2018. For whatever reason, there was an inability for the applicant to complete the subdivision, and it has technically lapsed. There is still a window of opportunity where the applicant can reapply to have council extend the permit approval time. And that's what this application is. It's basically requesting, I believe it's a 1-year extension to the permit so that they can finish the subdivision. Nothing would change based on the conditions that you had set previously. They just have an additional window to complete the subdivision as already approved. So if you're in favor of that, we just need a motion granting that extension as presented. I believe it's till February 5th, 2022.
Okay. Do you understand? Councillor Fromm makes that motion,
As discussed last week.
as discussed. Any discussion from anyone? All in favor?
Yes.
Okay, 9.11, the budget 2021 letter from the minister. This is interesting, you included this on our agenda tonight. So in the AUMA budget review, they talked about it was there's gonna be a boost for this year's money and then a 36% cut the next 2 years. Here he's saying a 25% cut. And then when I saw our actual numbers, it looks like a bigger than a 50% cut. So I'm confused.
So the province basically has outlined over the next 3 years, there's gonna be about $722 million that will be given to municipalities. MSI was supposed to end this year. Actually, it was supposed to end in 2017. The province extended it 5 additional years. It was supposed to end this year, and then next year the local government fiscal framework would kick in, and it was going to be at a reduced amount, approximately 80% of what our previous funding had been. In budget 2021, the province has kind of revised that format, and they're actually front-loading in the name of stimulus additional funding excuse me, in 2021. So the town will actually receive more money this year than we did last year for capital projects. The next 2 years will be substantially less. So instead of 1.196 billion for the total project, or for the total allocations to all the municipalities, it'll just be 485 million. If you take those numbers, add them up and divide it by 3, you get 722 million. So that's kind of where they're front loading, but they're balancing it out over the 3-year term. The trick is that the local government fiscal framework was supposed to be, and I don't have the exact number, but I think it was supposed to be about 760 or 780 million. So it's down 40 to 60 million dollars from what they had originally proposed last year. And so that does mean going forward that we will have less capital from the province to carry on with projects. So this is just for your information. I mean, they're saying it. They're saying it, but they're not really saying it. You know, be prudent, spend wisely, because at some point a fiscal reckoning is coming in the province, and you need to make sure that you're prepared. And so that wonderful, not so ominous layer of warning, I guess, can be there as we're discussing the capital projects for 2021 on the next item, or the next 2 items.
Okay. This is just for information purposes too?
Yes.
Any discussion from anybody on this?
Good for us this year.
When you see the numbers, it's really good for this year.
Yeah.
But then not great for the next 2. Okay. Then we'll move on to 9.12. Canadian Badlands Notice of Termination. You want to speak to this, Curtis?
The town of Raymond's been a member of the Canadian Badlands for a number of years. It's a regional tourism initiative. At one point, I believe, had over 40 member municipalities that ranged everywhere from Calgary east to the Saskatchewan border, I think even a bit further north, and then all the way down south to the Montana, Saskatchewan border, over through to maybe even Cardston. The entity has been heavily reliant on provincial grant funding. That is no longer a guarantee in the current fiscal climate. And it has gone through a major transition. Council had discussed the last, well, honestly, every year you've been, as a council, you've been discussing the value of Badlands, and I think no motion has ever been given to give the year's termination, but there was a conversation in the last couple of meetings about how that might be something you'd like to consider, so it's just brought here for your consideration. It costs the town about just under $3,000 a year. It's a per capita contribution between $2,500 and $3,000 a year for membership. So it's not a significant dollar amount in the scheme of the budget. However, that money could easily be spent on other priorities too. So it's definitely not a small matter. So
Made for some beautification.
If I remember right, there was the other 3 towns and our 4 mayors, they've dropped out already. They gave their
I believe, yes.
notification last year. So. Okay. So we need a motion on this. If someone would.
I just have one question.
Okay, go ahead.
Curtis, have you seen any value added to the town of Raymond because of Canadian Badlands over the last do we get anything from this at all?
We definitely have historically. I mean, the previous, Mayor Bonnie on the previous few councils was actually on the executive board of the Canadian Badlands. Through that, the Canada's Mormon Trail and the Chautauqua accessed grant funding through Badlands and also Travel Alberta. A study was done on the Canada's Mormon Trail that was paid for by the Badlands and Alberta Travel Alberta to kind of get that entity up and running at the time. It's not necessarily functioning, but the data that was collected is still very much value for us.
Okay.
And you know, there definitely has been value. They were big supporters of the Chautauqua, helping to get the word out, at least from the advertising perspective. However, things change. You know, I think the town of Raymond has kind of reevaluated what tourism for the town looks like, and it's going to be more so, I think, building on our existing strengths or on maybe more independent opportunities that have a higher return on investment. The drive-ins, for an example, we made money on the drive-ins, whereas the town contributed over $40,000 over 4 years to the Chautauqua, and we never made. I mean, we collectively made money, but it wasn't because of revenue necessarily, and the tourism that we experienced was largely local, whereas the drive-ins that we had were hardly local, and so it was truly tourism in that sense, supporting the local businesses. So it was far better return on investment for the contribution, and I think we could focus on more initiatives like that going forward. So I don't think it'll really hurt the town to not be a member of the Badlands. That doesn't mean we can't join them again if they're able to reevaluate their priorities and there's another value-added proposition they can offer at a later date.
So
That was great, I like that.
that was a good answer. We, years back, we had Darla, I can't remember her last name, but she came and she was totally funded by the Badlands, and she went through a lot of exercises with us on
Darla's,
tourism.
what's her name?
And the one other thing I'd say too is that the conferences that we would attend, I mean, that's where I was introduced to Roger Brooks, and I think that was great value to the town of Raymond. The report that he has and the insights it's provided, and so you know, it definitely has been valuable.
And we do have some assets that we've got, some tents, some hand washing machines, some other things from this too. Any Councillor Fromm?
Just a couple of quick questions. We've also got a entrance marker on the highway, you know, Badlands. Did they pay for that, or did we?
It was a joint contribution, I believe. I can't remember 100%, but it was the joint contribution, I believe.
It's a very nice sign, but I'll never forget my first reaction when I saw it. I thought, Badlands, Raymond? I could not make the connection. And one other question for, now, I don't think they're dissolving, but is there anything for municipalities that are leaving as far as assets go, or surplus? Is there anything that we get to take with us when we leave or not?
Maybe the sign.
Just the sign? Keep the sign. And do we have to take the sign down if we're not members?
We would take it down, yes.
But there's nothing for us to take with us as far as surplus dues or anything like that?
No, our funding went into support the operations of the staff of the organization. All the staff have been let go because the funding's evaporated, and so
Okay.
there's not a pot there to distribute.
Thank you.
So we need a motion to, or a notice of termination to Canadian Badlands. Councillor Peters?
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
Okay, good. Any discussion on this then? Then all in favor?
Yes.
Okay, good. 9.13, the AUMA budget 2021 response. This is the meeting I sat in and listened to, and the only good thing is they froze the education tax for 2021, so that's not going up.
Frozen-ish.
Frozen, well, they said it might be for another couple of years, but then that was kind of hard when they tried to explain that, but at least this year it's frozen.
Good.
So yeah, the total dollar amount is frozen. However, if Town of Raymond's assessment increases because of growth, then more is going to come out from our budget. And so
That's
it's
the issue, yes.
how it shifts throughout the province that you have to take into consideration there. The AUMA did a very good job, I think, analyzing the budget documents to kind of go over some various things. They talked about the unassigned local government fiscal framework, which we've talked about, the property tax there, which we've talked about. a couple of things of note is they haven't announced them yet, but they have identified, I think, up to $230 million or so that will go towards 14 new school projects, whether they're new projects or redevelopment of existing schools, modernization, sorry. And so we anticipate there'll be a press release funding announcement within the next couple of weeks. Theoretically, the town of Raymond's or Westwood School Division's application for a new high school in the town of Raymond is on that list. We'll see if it's funded. If it is funded, it causes some opportunities and also challenges for us at the town, and so we'll have to manage that accordingly. But AUMA was fairly accurate in saying there's good, there's bad, there's some ugly, there's some we're not sure in this, and I think that's what pretty much every organization, with the exception of AHS, is probably going through right now in reaction to the budget. So,
Bryce, is there a cat in the bag that Westwind is aware of without letting the cat out of the bag? Like, do they know? Because Rick McIver used to let jurisdictions know before the press release came out.
I just know what Curtis just said there, that we have an application up in Edmonton. I think it's a very strong application, but they won't know for sure until the province announces things. So nothing official.
Everybody's feeling hopeful though. We're all saying our prayers.
That was a
I
pretty
have a
big,
bit of anxiety.
that was a pretty big cat out of the bag. Okay, let's move on to 914 then, the 2021 to 2025 capital budget.
So I'm going to share my screen just because it's a little more conducive to what we're trying to do here. So this is the same document, but it's an Excel spreadsheet. Is that shared yet? There we go. Greg, you can tell. Is there any way to minimize that agenda screen, Greg? Without losing it?
That?
Maybe, Greg, if you want to go on the server, I'll close out of this and just come in the room there and we can have that conversation. So.
We have Abe here, not Greg.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll just come in there and I'll work through this. I apologize. Just hold on 1 second.
Oh, there's Greg.
There he is.
Spotlight.
Is that?
Should have went spotlight the attachment.
We're going through this quicker than I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought we were
I
gonna
might
be here
not need
till
Paul.
midnight.
My window closes at 9. I'm hoping to get home and have something to eat.
My window hasn't opened yet, so I'm doing the same, we're doing the same thing. We are.
I do too.
I have a 24/7 window.
So
Make sure that's on your second
how big a
screen.
window are you doing right now?
4.
That's what we do.
Okay.
Doesn't start till
Go ahead, Curtis.
Okay, just give me 1 sec.
7, whenever, you know.
That's the best time of the day to eat, I think.
I'm starving too, and it's not on purpose.
Okay, Councillor Foss and Copeters, can you see the spreadsheet? Can you hear me, Councillor Foss and Copeters?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can't see anything. I just brought the spreadsheet up from my agenda.
Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the exact document you have there before, where we can just kind of play with the numbers on the Excel spreadsheet. I'll just kind of briefly go over this document. On your left-hand side, we have the column B, which is your term priorities. That's what TP stands for. YP stands for year priorities, and EP stands for emergent priorities. Your term priorities were Project 845 trail expansion, was your number 1 term priority. The second term priority was Northwest infrastructure. The third term priority was Highway 845 pavement, and the fourth term priority was just improvements to roads and sidewalks within the community. We did, at our council planning session, went over a number of each department came and presented a bunch of different proposals. Council had some proposals of their own. You guys kind of weighed them out on a strategic process of kind of trying to focus through the chaff to kind of let the goodness come to the top. The analogy's escaping me, but where you want to focus the cream, there you go. To the top, and so that's where your YP priorities are. So your number one your priority was don't even have it on there. Sorry, it got deleted. I'd have to go look, but it would have been the I apologize. I must have erased that in my process here. It was playground enhancements was up there. It was the recreation equipment, and it was the walk. I'm feeling really bad now. I apologize. I'm not sure, but they're on here. These are some of those lists. I apologize. And emergent priorities are things that have come up in response to other things after our initial council planning session. So a new high school was something that happened after we had our first council planning session. And it's now an emergent priority because if a new high school is announced, the place that the town has chosen is going to require the relocation of the existing Stampede grounds and finding a new home for that. Then the second emergent priority was the wastewater treatment system expansion. We've had an application in since 2014. We're still waiting, and we have received approval for that now, and we'll be working through that process. And the final one is the raw water main replacement that was out by Cooper's Drop, that we've kind of started that process and are finishing payment this year. And then the other things are other priorities that have kind of been on the list or have been presented that you guys have kind of identified. So if you look under the column D, it's the names of the different projects, the color coded for community services, operational services, economic community development, Sugar City, and then just equipment. Column E is how we're going to fund them. If there's some text, an acronym in that column that's bold, that means that that's dependent upon grants that have already been allocated and they're not able to be changed. So those are not ones that we can adjust because we're committed due to existing grant obligations. And then in column F, it's the 2021 total costs. If they're bolded, again, those are ones we've already committed to. If they're not bold, they're at your discretion to play with. Scrolling down here, total capital expenditures in this list is $7,029,124. $3.5 million of that amount is the wastewater treatment system expansion. The rest is just included in these numbers. The blue section here are the revenues. We do have $5,599,565 in revenue, which leaves us a $1.4 million shortfall roughly. So that's what we have to play with. We got to cut out $1.429 million from our 2021 budget in order to make our capital budget balance for 2025 or for 2021. It's a 5-year capital spending plan. So whatever we don't put in 2021, we'll defer it and we'll include it into 2022. We don't need to balance those other years because they're not known yet. But they're just on our priority list of the things we're addressing. Before we do that though, if you just look in 2022, which is columns H, I, J, and K, so 2022 to 2025, we're between $125,000 and $400,000 in the deficit, which again just means that we'll have to make some adjustments there. But as best as we can, we've estimated what our capital contributions will be from the local government fiscal framework, so that we're playing with as accurate of a perception of what the future will be as we can at this point. So I'll leave it from here. The only other thing we can say for revenues is we do have $100,000 allocated administratively. We've done that for Northwest infrastructure. That's been one of your council priorities. We also, this amount is funded from our utility reserves. We collect about just over $300,000 annually from this amount, and this is what we're using to help fund capital replacement of infrastructure so that they're not for utilities. So it doesn't compete with the provincial grant funding, but also for specifically our wastewater treatment system expansion, the debenture that we're going to have to take out we're able to fund the debt payments with this utility reserve and not have it affect taxation or utility rates even for that matter, because they're independent. So that $100,000 is there to cover the Orange Northwest Infrastructure Phase 3, Line 10. However, we could add up to $200,000 more from our utility reserves to help fund utility-related improvements, such as the lines 19 and 20, which is the 2021 operations, water maintenance, and sewer maintenance plan that our Director of Operational Services presented. We were going to use that money, though, to help pay down the debt for our wastewater treatment system once we get going with that. Hasn't started yet. We haven't incurred it. So technically, you can play with that money. It would just delay an additional year, the time for us to pay off that debt at a later time. So it's a lot of words. You guys have looked at this list before. We've crunched a bunch of suggestions and scenarios, but I don't want to lead you. So feel free to lead the conversation, and I can chime in with suggestions if you'd like.
So I'm curious, this is coming to council instead of committee. Would it be better just to discuss this at committee meeting, or is this something we need to?
Either, I mean, it's the same from now until you pass it. We need time to kind of go through it and work through it. And so we were going to be having you discuss it today and discussing it next week unless you nail it down perfectly. And the goal is to have this be able so we can pass the operating budget and the capital plan for the beginning of April.
Okay. I'll start then that TP1, the Project 845 trail expansion. I thought that 500 on Highway 845 included that.
No, 100,000 was additional.
That's 250,000.
We got a CFEP grant for 125,000 for that project, and that's going to add extra amenities. So we are committed to 125 to match the 125.
So it's really 125 then. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's 250 total, but 125, that's the CFEP grant money. The other 125, we're going to have to contribute from existing MSI or gas tax.
And that comes off at the bottom. Okay.
Yeah.
I see that. Okay. And the fairgrounds project, that's what we're putting aside for.
$100,000 we put aside last year, and $100,000 we're putting aside this year to go towards the relocation, redevelopment of the grounds when and if the need arises.
The senior center, that's money that needs to be spent this year to improve that?
Could be spent, so it's not bold. So if it's not bold, you're not obligated. It's something that you can adjust the numbers or completely eliminate, and we'll defer to a later date. We did spend about $18,000 renovating the washrooms, both men's and women's washrooms in the seniors this year.
How much?
Or $18,000 last year, 2020's dollars, and another 37,000 or so probably went into the RCMP detachment and renovations. And that money, that work is just starting or will be starting soon, but it's 2020's money that we've kept in reserve for that.
What about the roof too, of the seniors, wasn't that included too?
That was, yes, that has happened. That was just, we're just funding that through operations. There was some wind damage recently.
What else is still left of the senior center?
Everything.
Done.
The kitchen needs to be redone, refloored, recarpeted, repainted. They wanted to have a commercial kitchen in there versus kind of what they have. They'd like to have a projector and a screen so that it's on the wall. Like there's just, it needs.
Wants and needs is what you're saying.
Well, there are some wants, there are some needs. I mean, it hasn't really had significant investment in for at least 20 years, I would say. Just like the RCMP detachment. And so it's just at that point where we just need to start putting money back into it. The community center, the museum, they're in the exact same boat, but we're hoping just to kind of knock off a couple of the RCMP detachment and the seniors, and then we can put our attention in later years to the community center and the museum and those types of facilities.
Okay. Anyone have any questions, just chime in, Councillor Voss.
Yeah, I was just curious. I suspect you don't have an answer for this, Curtis, but a chunk of this money is towards that A45 project. I doubt the province has actually made any announcements about infrastructure, paving, that kind of stuff. We don't have any indication yet, do we, as to whether or not that 845 paving is moving this year?
Nothing official, but the engineers that are on contract to do the construction are working feverishly. We've been getting constant phone calls. They're doing line locates, and we're going to be moving some infrastructure and extending some infrastructure across the roadways. I would be shocked if it didn't happen this year from everything we're hearing, but until it's announced, it's not official.
If you drive down there, all the fences have been moved, the trees have been cut, the caraganas have been cut.
So they're getting ready to
It
go.
looks like they're getting.
Fortis is in the process, or will be in the process of moving the power lines to make way for the road. Within a week or two, I've asked Eagle Engineering to give me a more accurate number so that if we don't need to allocate that entire amount, we can put it towards something else. We won't obviously know until the tenders are out what that cost will be, but we're trying to stretch the money as far as we can.
Okay.
And on a good note on the 845, one of the residents down there told me that he was very impressed with Alberta Transportation and how easy they were to work with and how accommodating they were to his property. So that was good to hear.
Yeah, for sure.
He thought he was going to lose a whole bunch more trees than he intended. So he was very happy.
Okay, the playgrounds enhancement project, that's what we're talking about at the, that's what Hugh's gonna do to fix them all up.
So the three playgrounds, Lions Park, Phillips Park, and what's affectionately known as Sliver Park, or the Southwest Green Strip Park. Those three properties, the playground structures won't be replaced in this amount, but there'll be added amenities, landscaping, irrigation, picnic benches or tables, things like that would go towards improving the three parks there. Obviously, the Southwest Green Strip Park needs a new playground structure, but that isn't being budgeted for at this time. But that was one of your highest rated priorities in your council planning session.
The Trailhead Park, that's what the province has come up with, what they want for that money there.
No, we don't know yet. So that's just a dollar amount I'm estimating for cost. They will not lease it to us. They're gonna want us to buy it.
What happened to $1?
I don't know. It might be $1, but they haven't come back to us yet. They're getting it assessed and appraised and coming back to us. So that's a placeholder. You can play with that number. I don't know what that number is. It might be $1. It might be $100,000. I really don't know, but
That's swampland. How many acres?
about 6.
6. Okay, interesting.
The sad thing is when you're coming up with $1.429 million, you can take away every single one of these items that's not prioritized or funded by a grant, and you still have to go into the YB7 priorities.
You do. I mean, you can adjust. You can still accomplish a lot of them, but you have to scale them down. Some of them down.
Now, the ones with the grants, the CFAP and the MCAC and stuff like that, are those can that money be moved around?
No.
It has to be spent on those line items.
Yes.
So, and are they fully funded by the grants? Each one of those amounts?
The MCCAC grant funding is 75 dollars. So we're on it's that 100,000, 75,000 for the province, 25,000. Well, no, there's 2 applications in there. So 100,000, the one at the top, $100,000. Yeah, that's 75% covered by the province. So we've gone there for 25,000, and that's improvements to the ice rink and the aquatic center to make them more energy efficient and reduce our operating costs. The MCC grant AC for line 27 community services equipment, that is $18,000 of grant funding, and the rest is a contribution from the town.
And can you not get the 18,000 and the 75,000 if you don't put in those contributions?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so that'll get to, that will be, and that was, again, one of your highest rated priorities there from Hugh's presentation was the equipment of, if we get the 4 electric UTVs, we can reduce our fuel costs, have the equipment, that money can go towards getting a more, a better watering trailer for all the watering that we're doing for trees and flowers and things for beautification, but also there'd be an increased ability to spray on windier days because the spraying unit they would get would keep the spray down and not have it go elsewhere. And we were able to fund both of those through the grant savings. And so,
what do you think about that as a way of looking at this project? I mean, to literally
leave the ones that are priorities alone, leave the ones that are funded by grant money alone, and look at the ones that are not prioritized.
For sure,
Well, that's kind of how we have to do it, I
for
think.
sure. Yeah,
You don't want the, you
You
don't
can't come up with $1.4 million.
you don't want to not get the grants,
Yeah.
you
now
know.
those grants are there, and they're like you said, 75 dollars.
The aquatic center arena energy retrofit, $75% the other one's 30% per unit. And so it worked out to 18,000 in savings. So you basically got one UTV for free. But
Worth doing.
But you're able to use that money
Yeah.
then to buy the watering trailer and the applicator.
So yeah, you're right, it is worth doing. Your Hells Creek practice range, I thought 14,000 fixed that east fence, west
No.
fence.
The west, no, the west fence, I'd have to look at it closer. I don't believe so. You could be right, but the recommendation that we're getting is that all of the poles need to be replaced at some point. And so instead of having you incur the full cost, I took the liberty of breaking it down into 3 years, where we're going to address the area that's immediately the poles are falling right now that are adjacent to the property that's there with the house. To get at least those first 5 or 6 poles replaced, they can put in the proper size poles that we want for now, and then as you progress down the road, you can extend out. However, if you'd like to only repair the fence, you can do that. We are losing a lot of balls there, and we spend about $8,000 to $10,000 a year on balls, believe it or not. And they all just get knocked into the neighboring yard, and then we have to buy them back for them. So it's in our interest to build the fence higher, and that's a way we can do it. But again,
You can go higher, because those poles are pretty high.
they're only 20 feet tall, and 35. I mean, 35 to 50 feet is kind of where you're going to want them to be at various sections. I think we're recommending 35 feet along the east side and 20 feet along the back wall. On the back, I think at the south end, they're 15 feet, I believe. They're short comparatively. So that's above ground. So they are taller because portions in the ground.
Mayor,
Yeah, Councilor Peters?
just correcting that. Curtis, I'm not sure when we did our fees schedule this year, do we have the fee schedule for what it costs for driving range usage?
We don't break down the driving range, but we make about $8,000 to $10,000 a year on the range. Is our
Well, I'm just wondering if we're losing $8,000 to $10,000 worth of balls every year, if that's more of a user fee type thing, and we increase that cost a little bit more on the people that use them, rather than taking that out of our budget.
I mean, we can do that, but it'll take quite a while for us to recoup that. I don't know, given our operating challenges, that we want to add that into our operating budget at this time as additional expense. We can recoup costs over time by increasing those rates, but again, you don't want your dollar. You can only raise the rates per ball so high before no one uses them anymore either, right? And you got to keep them somewhat competitive with the market. So it's a balancing act, but we can look at rates and adjusting them accordingly to kind of help make back a little bit of that expense over time. But you're not going to be able to do it for a while.
So we talked about Hells Creek, we talked about how we want that place to continue to look good. And so I think some money needs to go there, but I'm not sure how you've got it broken down here, what we can do.
So 52,000 is the minimum amount you can put towards a grant application for MSI Capital. It's a 5% allocation. The minimum you can use for these grants is 5% of MSI, which our allocation works out to just about 52,000.
Okay.
So that's the minimum you can put a capital grant towards a project this year. So that's why you don't see anything less than 52,000 because that's the minimum. You would just have to scrap it.
Well, it doesn't look good down there to scrap it. I don't know if you've driven down there, but as I've gone down there just to look at the pond, that west side of that doesn't look good. It's fallen down, there's holes in it.
I mean, there's the aesthetic side, yes, but it's also a safety concern that there is an adjacent property and poles. I mean, they will fall into the driving range, but there's people that live there, and it's more likely balls will fly into their living space.
But we have to knock some of the budget, some of these numbers down somewhere. So.
Yep.
So tell us your recommendations, Curtis.
Well, I don't want to do that unless you guys are. I mean, I'm happy to do that, but please don't take this as what you have to do.
Remember, we'll adjust this through the year too, and this is just like one, get this done. So seriously, $1.4 million is slash and burn on that one column, it really is.
So, senior center renovations, we did put some money into it last year. The 52,000, I'm recommending that we defer that over into 2020, to a later year. We're recommending that the project 100 North 50 East storm sewer installation and pavement gets deferred. And also the 100 East, 200 North to 300 North pavement and sewer line replacement gets deferred. That takes your number down to 1 million. Actually, no, sorry, that should be lower. That column wasn't deleted. So that takes us down to 652,000. Coming down the bulk water meter purchase, we can fund that either through utility reserves or we can fund that through our operations. Instead of it pulling out of capital, the north drainage project, we've done our south drainage diversion project. The north drainage one is something we need to be doing, but it wasn't, it's not totally done the engineering yet. That could be pulled out. And that brings us down to 350,000. If you wanted, you could utilize the rest of our utility reserves and add an extra $200,000 in revenue to fund the water sewer maintenance plan that our Director of Operational Services proposed in his project. That was the valves and the curb stops and the hydrants and those types of purchases to kind of keep up with that preventative maintenance instead of waiting for the leak to happen and then doing the fix. So we could add $200,000, which would knock that down to 150, or we could eliminate them completely or just reduce the dollar amount and bring it down. And then we're getting close. And so if we could, so I don't know if you guys want to talk, do you want to add a couple $100,000 from our remaining utility reserves, or do you want to keep them and have a $500,000 pot going towards our sewage wastewater treatment plant expansion, or just keep it at $300,000 going into 2022?
There.
Councilor Peters.
I would like to try and keep as much as we can, Curtis, to working on debt. I think especially with what we're seeing for the future next couple of years for MSI funding, I think we need to put and start the savings process. So is there a way to reduce either the water maintenance plan, or like do part of it this year and leave part of the sewer, or eliminate one of them, do one of the other?
Yep. Yeah, you can, it's at your discretion. I mean, we can fund some of these things in our operating budget, but we can't fund it all. And so, if you reduce them down just to that $52,000 amount, you're down to 254. Now you do have to add you either have to add an extra $100,000 in revenue, or you have to then pull it from elsewhere. Economic and community development, I had asked for $100,000 for wayfinding, parklets, and downtown beautification. I mean, that amount could be reduced down 50, 75,000 and find some savings. The hook truck operational, that's something that it's not a requirement, but we spend about $30,000 a year, well, $27,000 to $30,000 a year to GFL Environmental to haul our recycling trailers into Lethbridge. If we bought that hook truck and one of our staff members drive it in at our own schedule instead of waiting for them to come and having recycling bins be longer, we would pay for that truck in less than 3 years based on what our current expenses are. However, that's an $85,000 contribution when you're still $250 in the hole. But it's something you could consider doing. I think there's a business case for this, and I would highly recommend it, but it's not a requirement. We can continue to contract it out and take those expenses and recycle like we have been.
So on hook truck in 22, 23, 24, 25, it's another 50,000.
No, so I should have, lines 27 and 28, this is just community services equipment purchases and operational services equipment purchases. So I'm just allocating 50 grand a year to each of them. They can either spend it on something or defer it. If they need a new loader that's $250,000, maybe they defer it for 5 years and then make the purchase. You don't have to do that. You could allocate it elsewhere, but equipment purchases are something that are expensive, and we do want to have, we don't want all of our equipment to be like our grader, which is too old. But for the amount of use we use the grader, it still works. So
$250,000 deficit right now on $5.8 million, that's like 5%. You can find that in efficiencies, you know, in some of those big lines.
potentially, I'm a little
Potentially.
hesitant. I'm a little hesitant to do that
Have to
just because
plan
we
that
have
way.
to budget a balanced budget. If we find efficiencies, then it's that conversation that you guys had before where we can say, hey, what about this? This is a new opportunity that's arisen. This came in under budget. Because of that, we have some money. Do you want to do one of these other things that we had to defer, or do you want to do
That's
more?
what I'm thinking. This document will change 5 or 6 times throughout the year.
It won't be as much as last year because last year we purposely didn't allocate $250,000 to $300,000. We were waiting.
Right. Good point.
But once this is approved, we're going to be going full bore with a lot of these projects, and the only reduced amounts will be operational savings that happen just because they come in under budget.
Mayor?
Councilor Peters, go ahead.
Yeah, another thing I've been thinking about, the wayfinding parklets. I know we've had a discussion that we need to have a sit down of what the future downtown core area looks like. I wonder if we could reduce that some money and pay for more wayfinding and hold off on parklets and downtown beautification until we have a better idea what the future might look like for downtown.
I think I can concur with that.
I would agree with you.
I don't know what wayfinding would cost. That Curtis, could we do something for 50,000? Would that work?
We could definitely get started. I mean, it's going to depend on how extensive we want it and how ornate we want the post to look. We don't want it to be a industrial metal. You know, we want it to actually add to the welcoming aspect of the wayfinding in the community. But we can definitely get started, 100%, no question.
I think we need to do some sort of wayfinding, like say get started.
We
on
would
it
recommend that absolutely as well.
and get that started because we don't have any in town. We need some.
Yeah, we sure do.
I really don't
like
want
to.
to
I like to spend it all.
The Northwest infrastructure, the annual curb, sidewalk, and the pavement rehabilitation. I think that $300,000 needs to stay there. I would love to have been able to add more to at least a couple of those, but I see where we are. But I think those three need to try and stay as they are, just based on our infrastructure needs as a town.
Yeah, I agree with that one too. So there's some of these you can, it's hard to look at these. You could come back with another spreadsheet with some knocked off then, and we can see that again.
Well, I think column 2021 is the knocked off amount that's been updated, and so I won't really have much different than what's here on a later date. There's a $225,000 gap right now. You can definitely defer though. I'm not trying to continue the conversation. We got 95,000 for playground enhancements, 52,000 for purchasing land if we have to for the all-wheel park, 52,000 for phase 1 of the fence replacement, 100,000 for each of these that you guys have already identified. This number hopefully is less, the Highway 845 curb and gutter. We just don't know yet. I'd like to, we want to just pay off Gen X for finishing the raw water repair they did last year instead of carrying that on, because again, they were kind enough to let us break it down over 5 years, but I can't go that low in a capital grant. You know, you can either reduce one of these completely and fund it there, you can take down wayfinding a little bit, or you can remove your hook truck. And then you can add, we haven't added the additional utility revenue of another 100,000. We're going to fund these 52 each from these capital grants. But if you wanted to add 104,000 or 100,000 out of that utility reserve and save 100, carrying that over, that would bring your number down to 130.
So I mean, if we can see this, like take those out and then take a look, it's kind of hard. You're talking fast, and there's things
Okay.
like I agree with you. We can be taking out and moving.
What if we looked at the playground enhancement and did the 3 parks we were looking at and did one each year for the next 3 years?
You could do that. The challenge with spreading it into the future years is we're gonna have less money and we already have more than we have allocated. So it will make it more difficult. That park program was one of the highest year priorities that you had based on your planning session. Doesn't mean you have to fund it completely, but just so you remember what the voting was like, so you're meeting those objectives, so.
Am I expecting the offer to come through on the land purchase for the Alville Park, or the evaluation?
At 6 acres, that's like, just under 10,000 an acre.
I mean, do you know when you're expecting that
I
evaluation?
don't know.
So
I
it
don't
could be August?
I think it would be sooner than that, personally. I was kind of inquiring with them as to where we were at with that, and they said they'd get back to me. They had sent it off. I don't think it would take that long to work through. It's been at least 2 weeks, 2-3 weeks since that conversation's happened, so I would anticipate it's within the month. We would have a better idea. We don't technically have to finalize this till that first council meeting in April is what we're forecasting for. So there is still some time.
And if we agree to purchase that, when would they expect payment?
Well, I'm sure we could work with them. I'm sure it wouldn't be overly stringent. But they
So
would.
that one could come out too, then, 'cause it's just a guess anyway.
Yeah, it is. It's totally a guess. You could pull the 52 out of there. Because that is strictly just a guess. So now you're down to 177. The one thing I was saying when I was doing my number crunching is, as much as I hate to do it, but sidewalks and curbs, what we've done, and pavement, what we've done the last few years, we've only really budgeted under 70 for each of those, just due to trying to make our other priorities meet. So if you knock those down to 75,000 each, you're down to 125,000 basically. You're still getting a significant kind of investment there. And you could,
And that's all that enhanced MSI this year, isn't it? That's included in there.
or gas tax fund, but yes.
Okay.
So if you knock those down to 75,000,
You're knocking out 13 and 14, right?
yeah, sorry, 11 and 12, or lines 11 and 12.
Knocking those two to 75.
Yeah, I have it highlighted on the TV there, Jim, if you want. So,
Okay.
And then if you bring in $100,000,
if you bring in an extra $100,000 from our utility reserve,
does anybody hate to do that?
you're down to a $27,000 hole.
Yeah, unless we can find something else we need to be knocking off.
Remind me, I think you've already said this, Curtis, but was our intention on that utility reserve, were we using that this year towards this sewer project debt?
Not necessarily. So we have $300,000 last year that we have saved. That's going to go towards that project. We are on the hook for at most $2.1 million. If the project comes under budget, then our portion of that comes down. But we're hoping to have as much of that money saved as we can so that the total amount in debt we do have to take out is less. And then the total amount to pay back that over time is less. And we can pay it down sooner.
And if there are efficiencies in that project, does that all accrue to us?
It'll be equally split, 40% to the feds, 32.5 or 32% to the province, and we're at 27, I think, or whatever the difference is.
Pretty close, $27,000.
That's where we're at. Could that come out of the wayfinding parklets? Drop that down to 50?
Hey, it could be whatever you'd like. I think something has to be in the economic development line item because wayfinding has been a priority for quite some time. And I think getting started is important.
It's just so hard to
Like
decide what's your priority.
I'm not a big fan of the parklets though. In fact, I think we saw one company on Main Street do their own little parklet. And it was pretty effective, you know, they could.
Well, I think the
Yeah, to me,
wayfinding is more
wayfinding is a must.
Wayfinding is very important, but I'm not thrilled about parklets.
Wayfinding is way more important than the parklets, you know, because To me, if a business wants to incorporate that into their
So-
business, they can
Let them
do
do
it
it.
on their own.
In fact, they don't even have to apply for a permit, just block those.
Just can do it.
If you drop wayfinding, parklet, downtown beautification to 52,000, which is kind of that minimum grant amount, you're $4,500 and change, we could transfer that from operations. That's a small enough dollar amount. So theoretically, you balance like this. Doesn't mean you have to do it. You can definitely adjust them accordingly still, but
Gives us something to work with, or work from.
This is kind of depressing work because all of these things are important.
Yeah.
correct.
So
It's really
it's depressing to chip them off, but
This is the one meeting one of the meetings, and I dislike the most is when we have all these parties that we all love and want to do and make the town better, and we have to chip away because we don't have funds. So I need one of you to become a millionaire and donate money back to town.
I was gonna say, where's that rich uncle we've been looking for? You know, just can't get him,
where's Jesse Knight when you need him, huh?
right? Or
Okay, so
Well, that gets you close.
yeah, I mean, we're balanced if we put $4,500 from our operations. So that doesn't mean this is a foregone conclusion unless you want to pass it tonight. We can defer it to another discussion at committee next week and then,
Well, we're gonna have more discussion tonight in close too about stuff too.
so.
So,
Okay, so we'll just, if we could just have a motion to table this to next week's committee meeting and we'll bring this back for further discussion.
I'll make the motion, we'll table this till next week. meeting.
okay, any other discussion? All in favor? I see what you were saying, I kept trying to follow on this, Curtis, on my own screen, I'm knocking them off there.
Yeah.
I was
couldn't
gonna
remember which
say,
ones he
I
was
don't know.
doing.
I'm like, this screen looks different on my screen.
Wish you could knock it off my screen.
And now I know how you leave that blank column in between the years. That's brilliant.
Okay, good.
I'm trying to keep up on my calculator.
I was trying to watch on this, I was making notes and I couldn't keep up. Okay, committee reports. Some of us have put in our committee reports, others haven't. Anybody have anything to add, committee reports?
Yes, I do.
see any on that.
Councillor Hickey, you got some,
Yeah, we had a, soft girl meeting last week by Zoom. I really enjoyed it. This is probably my favorite one I've ever attended. Just for the simple fact is that we divided things up into three nights, and you picked which night you tuned in. And we had a lady from, it's called the Killick Leadership Group, and her name's Kathy Goulet, and she kind of facilitated all three of the meetings. And then she brought everything together of what we talked about. What was really nice about it was there weren't so many people trying to fight for airtime on what to say. So a lot of people that usually aren't very outspoken got a chance to say stuff. But we just went over a bunch of stuff. We talked about each community in regards to what each community's best economic development opportunity is and what their biggest challenges are and readiness and how we can achieve these things and some of the opportunities that are out there. And the group that I was in was very, very active, very vocal. Our 2-hour meeting ended up being over 3 hours. But it was good because we learned a lot about other communities that, at least I learned about some other communities I didn't know about. And they learned things about Raymond that they didn't know about. And so it was a very proactive meeting. And I felt very good about it. So what it boils down to is that we need to, like we all came to the conclusion we need to work together and help each other become better. Some of the challenges that people are facing are commercial attraction. That's one thing I said is that we have challenges attracting commercial to Raymond, but things are, with the new Dairy Queen and Eagle Saw and stuff like that last year, things are progressing and we got a lot of things on the go. And we talked about why that is, and I said it's driven by our EDO, which I think Greg's done a lot of work on that, and so now other towns are thinking about, well, maybe we need to get an economic developer to help us bring things into town. So those are the kind of things that we did. It's kind of like a workshop that we did. So it was very good. It was, I think everybody, was very positive about it. One of the biggest challenges, like, take, for example, Clarisol, is they're trying to attract commercial businesses out of Calgary because it's a lot cheaper for taxes and everything else. But their challenge is they're having problems finding the land for these places to come to. Like buying the land, within, just on the fringe of the community for these, they say they have a lot of business that want to come out of Okotoks and Calgary. So it's cheaper to run a business in Clarisol, but they're having troubles finding the land. So we had a discussion on that, on different ways that they could maybe get that and maybe some grants they could look at and stuff like that. So it was a very positive meeting. So it was very good going forward. It's going to be a lot better if we keep on meeting this way.
Very good, good report. Anyone else have anything to report? It's not already written down?
I don't have anything written on mine. How come mine's not populating? I don't know why. Who else wrote stuff on here?
So Curtis, did
I
you,
don't see anything.
Councillor Harker says that she
I'm
sent something in
updating.
to you?
Oh, right here.
I don't
Usually this
recall
changes
getting an
colors.
email, but if she did, we could definitely add it to the
Okay,
record.
I
I
got
won't do it to that if
I
I
see
drop
that.
that.
Okay. Anything you want to report then, Councillor Harker or Councillor Foss? Or Councillor Fawn?
I just wanna ask a question. Does anybody know what crokinole is? Crokinole, ice?
Yeah.
Like, why are we doing that? Out at
Reason
the golf
it came
course?
along when I was a kid,
With, it's kind of like curling?
like curling rocks.
Yeah. Do you know about that? We talked about it at our health and communities. It was kind of the same idea as you're meeting with different communities that are looking for ways to, have inexpensive, recreation for their citizens. And they talked about this crokinole and how it just looked so like fun. They showed us some demonstrations of it.
Maybe you'll have to,
Out at the golf course,
on one of the other
on one of the
ponds.
other ponds, they could do this, and they just do a big circle, and they have they're wooden, so little kids can do it, anybody can do it, it just looks super fun. Anyways,
Maybe
I've
talk-
never heard of it before.
Maybe talk to Hugh about that for next year.
Yeah, yeah. It just looks
The
super
problem
fun.
about the ponds on the golf course, I was talking with you and Kyle, is that pond 7 is about the only one we can use, pond 7.
Oh, okay,
The other ones have running water going underneath them. So he said like the big one on hole 9, they're doing depths and they're like, 12 inches, 12 inches, 4 inches, 12 inches, 2 inches.
yeah,
Because the water's running through it, 'cause it's the irrigation, right?
yeah,
So it's hard, with that water running through, it's hard to, it's a safety thing
okay.
for that, but
Maybe they could start earlier in the year.
maybe they could, yeah, and then when it's really cold, it'd be fine, but when it starts to warm up a little bit, then
Start
that's,
running water.
you know.
Okay.
Just a
Anyone,
thought.
It's really something to look
Yeah.
at for sure.
any questions on anybody's reports? If not, then we need a motion to accept committee reports.
I'll move to accept committee reports.
Councillor Harker moves, all in favor? Okay, correspondence. The last one that Curtis put on, that Minister of Justice and Solicitor report, letter request concerning RCMP. You can see the Crow's Nest Pass wrote this. Councillor Fromm, you kind of suggested that maybe we should wait on this.
I can feel that.
Does anyone else have a differing opinion, or would you like us to write this letter too?
I prefer to sit it out. see
So
what
do
happens.
I prefer to sit it out, because I don't think we really, they're saying it's going to be more expensive. Well, I mean, there's just so many things that we don't really know.
And I agree with Councilor Fromm's comment earlier about, they have bigger fish to fry right now. It's not something that we need to
It's,
do
it's
right
not
now.
gonna happen
It's
next
not
week.
gonna happen right away.
So remember how it works with us when people hear about us, this council doing things, they write letters to try to stop us from doing it, and that's all this is.
Yeah.
Just to let them be aware that people are watching and taking notice. It's a good letter that was written by, Crow's Nest Pass Council.
I like to wait on to see what happens.
Okay, we'll keep our ears open then, is that okay with everybody? We'll keep our ears open, and if we have to write something, we'll write it quick. Policing is one of the ones that I try to listen to whenever I hear anything by mayors and reeves and these AUMA reports, and I'll try to let you know what's going on too, so. Okay? Anybody else have anything they wanna talk about on correspondence? Okay, if not, then we need a motion to accept correspondence. Councillor Fawn makes that motion. All in favor? Okay, now we need a motion to go into closed. Councillor Hagee, all in favor?
Yes.
Okay, we're going into close. Thank you. We now need a motion.
Yes.
Okay, can you scroll back so we can see what that was? What we
I-
called that?
Sorry, what's that, Mayor?
We have to move our county commitment,
Gotcha.
I mean,
That's
our
what I was trying to see.
council commitment.
Where's that, Greg?
I'll move
This
our
one here.
county our
Council.
council commitment.
Right there, okay.
I
So we need a motion to approve this. So,
That's what I just-
Councillor Harker then. So, all in favor?
Yes.
Okay, good. Now we need a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Councillor Harker moves to adjourn, all in favor?
Yes.